With my half marathon fast approaching, I figured it was time I pick a race day shoe. So today I'm gonna compare the Nike Alphafly 3 versus the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. So in this video, I'm gonna compare different components of this shoe from the upper to the midsole, the outsole, the overall quality of the shoe. And then at the end of this video, one of these shoes will be chosen as my race day shoe and the other shoe will be sent back. And now before you go and say, well, why don't you just keep both shoes? There's quite a simple answer to that question, and that's that I still enjoy being married, so one of these shoes has to go back. All right, so really quick, some overall specifications of the shoes. Both of these shoes are in my true to size US men's 10.5. The ASICS Metaspeed Sky weighs 195 grams in that US men's 10.5. The Nike Alphafly 3 weighs 225 grams in that US men's 10.5. Last thing to note, both of these shoes were purchased with my own money. They were not sent to me by either brand, which means all the opinions I have on both of these shoes are my opinions alone with no bias from either brand. So let's get into it. All right, so we'll start with the upper of each shoe. We'll actually start with the Nike Alphafly 3. The upper is a new version of what Nike calls their Atom Knit upper. They've been using this through all the iterations of the Alphafly. I've ran in each version of the Alphafly, the version 1, version 2, and version 3, and put quite a bit of miles on each shoe. And I will say that this version of the Atom Knit upper is probably one of my favorite of the three. As you can see, it is a one-piece construction, so it's a booty-like upper with the Atom Knit. And of the three versions, this is the easiest shoe to put on, which is relative considering they're all kind of hard to put on. But this Atom Knit upper feels extremely snug. It might almost be actually too small when I think about it, because when I wear the shoe, it does feel tight up here in the toe box, which Nike is known for being a narrow shoe. But in terms of how the upper feels through here, as well as through the toe box, I've never had any issues in all three versions when it comes to any blistering or bleeding from rub with the shoe being narrow. But overall, the upper is breathable. Like I said, you do have a lot of construction through the heel, really down through this kind of lower part of the heel. You have some padding, and as you can see, there's padding through the upper part of the heel near the ankle as well. So it's a lot more structured back here through the heel. One thing that is a positive for that is if you are looking at taking the shoe over the full marathon distance, some of that structure through the heel will be beneficial in the late miles if you start to really fall apart. Having some of that structure may help in not making the shoe feel so wobbly and loosey-goosey and just kind of fighting against you when you're fatigued in those late miles in either your half marathon or the full marathon. Now looking at the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris, the upper is what ASICS calls their Motion Wrap 2.0. And again, similar to the Alphafly, this upper is insanely thin and extremely breathable. It is your standard construction. So you have a tongue in here, which is also razor thin. There is no gusset with the tongue, so the tongue is just free hanging. I had no issues with that in the 16-mile run I did with this shoe recently. There is also a heel counter similar with the Alphafly, so there is some structure through the heel, a lot less structure than with the Alphafly. As you can see, the padding as well through the heel into the ankle lock is a lot more minimal compared to the Alphafly. So now to the point system for this video to help me kind of help you understand why I'm picking which shoe I'm picking. And so now for the uppers, I'm gonna give the point to the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. I personally prefer the more traditional style upper. The lighter, less structured upper just feels nicer, and there's a little more room through the toe box, which I think will be more beneficial through those later miles. All right, the next thing we'll talk about is the midsole, and this time we'll actually start with the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. This midsole is a new iteration of the Flight Foam Turbo Plus, and I have to say this is the best midsole that ASICS has come out with for their race day shoe to date. Similar to the Nike Alphafly, I've ran in every iteration of the ASICS Metaspeed Sky, and of all the versions, this midsole is by far the best. It is extremely bouncy, really soft, but yet firm. And then also with the placement of the plate, which I know is a highly debatable thing between which shoe you should get, whether it be the Sky or the Edge. The Edge was sold out, so the Sky it was for me, made the decision easy. crazy. But either way, with the placement of the plate and this new foam, this midsole is amazing. One thing I will note really quick about the midsole is if you look at the overall base, you do have a little bit of a wider base through the midfoot area than on previous iterations, but the heel is extremely narrow for this shoe. So just be aware that if you're looking at the shoe for a race day shoe and you are worried that in the later miles you may have issues with stability, then the Metaspeed series may not be the best for you. I had no issues with the shoe, but if I really fell apart in a race, I do wonder if this narrower heel would start to become more of an enemy than a friend. But yeah, the Flight Foam Turbo Plus is an absolute game changer with this shoe and makes this shoe an extremely enjoyable ride. Now going on to the midsole for the Nike Alphafly 3. This is Nike's trusted Zoom X midsole. So the same foam compound they've been using in all of their race day shoes. The major change with the Alphafly 3 is that you no longer have that like decoupled groove that was kind of happening behind the AirPods. I really do actually enjoy the way the full single piece of midsole works. It feels extremely smooth in your transition, and the Zoom X foam is an absolute delight to run in. Every single version of Zoom X that I've run in, I've really enjoyed. It's an extremely soft midsole compound that is fun to run in and gives you a lot of energy return. One thing I will note in my initial run of this shoe is that the AirPods in this iteration of the shoe versus the Alphafly 2 and even the Alphafly 1 did actually feel extremely firm underfoot. And I'm not sure if it's the way they position the AirPods or where the positioning of the plate is right above the AirPods, or if it has to do with the fact that the midsole is all now one unified piece versus that decoupled groove, which maybe gave some more flexion depending on where I land on my midfoot. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but the midsole does feel a little firmer underfoot with the AirPods. I do wonder if over time that would break up a little bit as the plastic that kind of exists with these AirPods, you know, kind of loosens up a bit, and the Zoom X foam also softens over time. All right, and so now awarding a point to one of these shoes for the midsole. Honestly, I'm actually gonna give a point to both of these shoes, so there's really no winner here. I would say it's a tie. The Flight Foam Turbo Plus foam as well as the Zoom X foam are both an absolute delight to run in on older iterations of the Metaspeed series. So that Flight Foam Turbo foam, I would say the Zoom X would get the point if it were comparing to like the Metaspeed Plus or the Metaspeed Original. But with this new formulation of the Flight Foam Turbo Plus, which is a PIBA based foam now versus that nylon base that ASICS used to do, this now makes this shoe comparable to the Zoom X foam in terms of energy return, the comfort you're getting with the shoe while you're running. So both of them get a point. Like I said, it's a tie. You'd be happy with either shoe that you went with. All right, so the third category is the outsole. We'll go back to the Nike Alphafly version 3. As you can see with this outsole, it's an extremely robust outsole, which is pretty common for the entire Alphafly series. As you can see, you have a lot of tiny lugs as well as this like almost basketball style unit going on right under the AirPod. And then you have the two rubber units at the back of the heel. One thing I will say about this outsole is that I've run the Alphafly 2 as well as the Alphafly 1 in almost every single weather condition you can think of, and I have never had issues with this outsole. It's an extremely reliable outsole when it comes to poor weather conditions, and I've never had issues in terms of worrying that the shoe was unstable or that I was gonna lose my grip in a race or a run because of the outsole. And now the outsole of the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. As you can see, the outsole here is a pretty flat outsole. There's absolutely no lugs. What ASICS does instead to try and provide traction with this outsole is you see all these little hole cutaways that exist that kind of create some indentation with this outsole. And then you have the outsole rubber running down to the bottom. And then you have some rubber over here as well to protect for the heel. Now, in terms of the outsole outsole for the ASICS shoe. It is not as reassuring as the Alphafly when it comes to the overall outsole in any type of weather condition. This is one of those outsoles that in rainy or wet or even muddy conditions, I feel like I would struggle a lot more to find that traction that I need to make sure that I'm sure-footed, especially when I'm running at the higher paces. It's still a really good outsole in most common conditions that you would find, but a race like the 17.75K that I recently had, this shoe could have potentially been a nightmare when it comes to the outsole of the shoe. All right, and if you couldn't tell from the comparisons of the outsole, this one's pretty obvious. The Alphafly definitely wins in terms of the outsole. Like I said, this one just allows me to do so many more runs in so many different weather conditions without having to worry, whereas with the Metaspeed, the weather has to be pretty decent for me to really trust that I'm gonna be able to get everything I can out of the shoe. All right, so the next category is the quality of the shoe. I'm gonna start with the Alphafly 3, and honestly, this one's gonna be pretty quick. I am extremely disappointed with the overall quality of the shoe. There's a lot of issues with like the paint just not looking good. This paint is like offset on the back as well as just looks extremely tacky. This like giant Zoom X is also tacky, as well as this like Alphafly logo. There's like a bunch of stitching issues that I have with the shoe. I think on this one specifically, there's like stitching coming out of the tongue. Yeah, there's stitching coming out through the heel. The other one, I have like a huge, let me actually grab it really quick. Yeah, so the other Alphafly, I have this huge like piece of string actually coming out of the tongue, as well as with this shoe, same thing. There's just a bunch of stitching issues. The Atom Knit actually through here just has like some weird stitching, and I don't know if that's the way it's supposed to look. It doesn't look like it's supposed to look that way. It almost looks like there's like snags, like something caught it and snagged the Atom Knit, because it doesn't look like it should be there. And then there's also just like loose glue throughout. Like the quality on this shoe for it being $285, $302 after tax is extremely disappointing, which leads me to the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. The quality of the shoe is phenomenal. And so with that, you already know which shoe is getting the point for the quality category. It's the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. All right, and with all the categories out of the way, the only thing left to do is pick a shoe for race day. And if you haven't noticed already throughout this video, it's probably pretty obvious which shoe I'm picking for race day. And that is the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris, which means unfortunately the Alphafly 3, as hard as it is to get right now, is going back to Nike, because there's just too many things that I really cannot put up with when it comes to this shoe as an overall race day shoe. The quality of the shoe is just not there. The performance of the shoe is really great, but when it comes to the weight savings that you get with the Metaspeed Sky Paris and the overall performance, this is just, to me, subjectively, the better shoe at the moment. And honestly, I'm really excited to take this for the full half marathon distance. And so that is it for my comparison between the Nike Alphafly 3 versus the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. Let me know in the comments which shoe you would choose for your race day. And as always, thanks for watching.